The old bell above the door made a tired sound as it swung open. Sam Carter looked up from the tractor engine he was fixing and wiped his dirty hands on a rag. He had owned this small repair shop in rural Kansas for almost 15 years now. He fixed tractors, trucks, and just about anything else that broke down in the small farming community of. But the customer standing in his doorway was unlike anyone he had ever seen before. She was a little girl, maybe 5 or 6 years old. Her skin was a soft purple color like lavender flowers in spring. Her eyes were large and bright, the color of purple gemstones, and they seemed to catch every bit of light in the dusty shop. She wore a simple white dress that looked like it was made from something magical, though now it was dirty and wrinkled. Dried tear marks ran down her purple cheeks. In her small arms, she held something that looked like a doll, but it was clearly much more than that. It was a small robot about 2 feet tall, shaped like a human woman. The design was beautiful and strange, with joints that seemed to flow like water and a face that looked almost real. Sam put down his tools and walked slowly toward the girl. He did not want to scare her. "Hello there," he said in a gentle voice. "Are you lost, sweetheart?" The little girl shook her head. Her lower lip was trembling like she was trying very hard not to cry again. "Please," she said. Her voice had a strange accent that Sam could not place. It seemed to make the air around her words vibrate in an odd way. "Can you fix her? Myra will not wake up. I tried everything, but she will not wake up." Sam knelt down so he could look at the girl at her own level. Up close, he could see that the little robot was damaged. There was a thin crack running along its back, and when the girl shifted her grip, something inside made a rattling sound. "What happened to her?" Sam asked. "We were playing in the garden behind the old farmhouse, the one nobody lives in anymore. I did not know the gravity here would be so strong. On my home, things fall slower. Myra tried to catch me when I jumped too high and she fell on the rocks." The girl's voice broke. "She has been with me since I was born. My papa made her for me before he went away forever. She is my best friend. She is my only friend." Sam felt something squeeze tight in his chest. He thought about his own daughter, grown up now and living far away. He thought about all the broken toys he had fixed for her when she was small. "What is your name?" he asked. "That is a very pretty name. My name is Sam." He held out his hands. "May I look at her?" Hesitated for just a moment. Then she carefully placed the robot into Sam's rough, work-worn hands. The machine was lighter than he expected, but he could feel a faint warmth coming from inside it, like it still held some kind of life. "I have to be honest with you," Sam said, turning the robot over gently. "I fix tractors and trucks mostly. I have never seen anything like this before. I do not even know what half of this technology is." "But you fix broken things," said. She said it like a fact, like she had read it somewhere. "That is what you do. Myra told me that humans are very good at fixing broken things. She said it is one of the things that makes your species special." Sam looked at the hope shining in those big purple eyes. He thought about how easy it would be to say no, to explain that this was beyond his abilities, to send this strange little girl on her way and get back to his simple work. But he could not do it. "I will try my best," he said. "I cannot promise anything, but I will try. You sit right there on that stool by the window and I will see what I can do." Nodded seriously, like they had just made an important agreement. She climbed onto the old leather stool that Sam had sat on thousands of times while waiting for parts to dry or glue to set. Her short legs dangled high above the floor. Sam carried the robot to his main workbench and switched on the bright lamp overhead. The evening sun was starting to come through the windows, making everything golden and warm. What Sam did not see, what he could not possibly have seen, was that he was being watched. Outside the window, hidden by technology far beyond human understanding, stood a woman. She was tall and proud, with the same lavender skin as the little girl. But where looked soft and young, this woman looked like someone who had commanded armies and ruled worlds. She wore armor that seemed to be made of captured moonlight, and her eyes held the weight of centuries. Beside her stood 4 guards in dark uniforms, their hands resting on weapons that could level buildings. Behind them, invisible to anyone who might walk by, sat a spacecraft the size of a small house. The woman was Empress of the Seventh Dominion, ruler of 400 star systems and uncountable trillions of beings. She was also the mother of the little girl sitting on the stool inside the repair shop. "This is foolish," one of her guards whispered. "The princess should not be in there alone with that primitive." "She is not alone," replied, her eyes never leaving the window. "I am watching, and this is necessary." "Necessary for what, my empress?" Did not answer right away. She watched as the human mechanic carefully placed her daughter's companion on his workbench. She watched as he gathered his crude tools and began to examine the damage with patient, careful eyes. "My husband believed in humans," she finally said. "He studied them for years before he died. He said they were different from every other species in the galaxy, not because of their technology, which is primitive, not because of their strength, which is average. He said they were special because of something else, something harder to measure." "And what was that?" Watched the human begin to work, his rough hands moving with surprising gentleness over the delicate alien machine. "Compassion," she said. "He believed they would help others simply because it was the right thing to do, not for money, not for power, not for advantage, just because someone needed help." "That seems unlikely, my empress. Our studies show humans are often violent and selfish." "Yes, they can be, just like every species, including our own." Eyes narrowed as she watched Sam bend over the robot, completely focused on his task. "But my daughter believes her father was right. She wanted to test his theory. She wanted to find out if humans would help a stranger for no reason at all." The guard looked uncomfortable. "And if this human fails the test?" "Then perhaps my counsel is right. Perhaps humans should be contained to their own system, kept away from the rest of the galaxy until they prove themselves worthy." "And if he passes?" Empress watched as the human mechanic began to sing softly to himself while he worked, some simple tune that seemed to help him focus. His whole attention was on the broken robot in front of him. He had no idea that the fate of his entire species might rest on what he did in the next few hours. "If he passes," said quietly, "then everything changes." Sam spread his tools across the workbench and studied the robot under the bright light. He had been fixing machines his whole life, ever since he was a boy helping his father repair farm equipment. He had fixed engines that were older than he was. He had brought dead machines back to life when everyone else said they were beyond saving. But this was something completely different. When he carefully removed the back panel, using a flathead screwdriver because it was the only thing that fit, he found himself looking at technology that made no sense to him. The circuits inside did not look like circuits at all. They seemed to flow like liquid metal, changing shape slightly as he watched. The power source hummed with a soft blue light, and he could feel it giving off warmth against his fingers. There were materials inside that he could not identify, things that felt like glass but bent like rubber, metals that seemed to weigh nothing at all. Sam sat back and rubbed his eyes. For a moment, he thought about giving up. How could he possibly fix something he did not understand? It would be like asking a blacksmith from ancient times to repair a computer. The gap in knowledge was simply too large. But then he looked over at, sitting on her stool by the window. She was watching him with complete trust in her eyes. She believed he could do this. She had come to him because she believed humans were good at fixing broken things. Sam took a deep breath and looked at the robot's insides again. He might not understand the technology, but damage was damage. After 30 years of repair work, he had learned that all broken things shared certain truths. Something was always out of place. Something was always cracked or bent or disconnected. You just had to find it. "Tell me about Myra," he said as he began to search for the problem. What is she like? His face lit up a little. She is wonderful. Papa made her to be my companion and teacher. She knows everything about the stars and planets. She tells me stories at night when I cannot sleep. She holds my hand when I am scared. She sounds like a good friend. She is the best friend. When Papa died, she was the only one who understood how sad I was. Everyone else wanted me to be strong and brave because I am a princess. But Myra let me cry. She said crying was not weakness. She said it was just love with nowhere to go. Sam paused in his work. That was a beautiful way to describe grief. He thought about his own wife, gone now for 5 years, and how he still sometimes cried when he found one of her old things around the house. Myra sounds very wise, he said quietly. She is. Papa put all his love into making her. He said she carries a piece of his heart inside her, so even when he was gone, I would always have part of him with me. Sam returned to his examination with new focus. Somewhere inside this machine was a piece of a father's love for his daughter. That made this repair feel more important than anything he had ever done. After several minutes of careful searching, he found the problem. Near the center of the robot's chest, there was a small crystal about the size of his thumb. It glowed with a soft pink light and seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. But there was a crack running through it, thin as a hair but clearly visible under his magnifying glass. The crystal had also come loose from its housing, tilting to one side in a way that was clearly wrong. I found it, he said. This crystal here, it is cracked and out of place. Jumped off her stool and came to stand beside him, rising on her toes to peer at the robot's open back. Her breath caught when she saw what he was pointing at. That is her memory core, she whispered. That is where she keeps everything, every story Papa told me, every song he sang, every moment we have shared since I was a baby. If that crystal breaks completely, it will all be lost forever. Sam felt the weight of responsibility settle onto his shoulders. This was not just about fixing a machine anymore. This was about saving 17 years of memories. This was about preserving the last connection between a little girl and her dead father. He examined the crack more closely. On any normal component, a crack like this would mean replacement. You could not fix something that had broken at such a basic level. You had to throw it away and put in a new one. But there was no new one available. There was no factory he could call, no parts store he could visit. This crystal was unique, probably made by the girl's father himself, and there was nothing else like it in the universe. I have an idea, Sam said slowly, but I need you to trust me. I trust you, said without hesitation. Sam walked to his supply shelf and began searching through boxes and bottles. He pushed past welding rods and soldering wire, past tubes of regular glue and cans of lubricant. Finally, he found what he was looking for. It was a small bottle of industrial epoxy, the strongest adhesive he had ever used. He had bought it years ago to repair a cracked engine block, and it had worked perfectly. The stuff was designed to handle extreme heat and pressure, to bond materials together at an almost molecular level. Sometimes you cannot replace what is broken, he explained to as he carried the bottle back to the workbench. So instead, you reinforce it. You make the broken piece stronger than it was before. Outside, Empress leaned closer to the window, her face showing real interest for the first time. Her chief engineer had joined her now, hidden within the same invisible field, watching the human work. What is he doing? The engineer muttered. That adhesive compound is completely primitive. It cannot possibly repair a memory crystal. The resonance frequency alone will shake apart any bond he creates. Be quiet and watch, commanded. Inside, Sam worked with careful precision. First, he used a tiny brush to apply the epoxy along the crack in the crystal. The adhesive was thick and clear, and it flowed into the hairline fracture like water into a crack in dry earth. He used just enough to fill the gap, not so much that it would interfere with the crystal's function. Then he took a length of thin copper wire, the kind he used for detailed electrical work, and began to wrap it gently around the crystal, not tight enough to squeeze, but firm enough to provide support. He created a tiny brace, a cage of copper that would hold the crystal steady in its housing. "What are you doing now?" asked. "Giving her heart something to lean on," Sam replied. "When something is hurt, sometimes it just needs support while it heals." He worked for another hour, making tiny adjustments, checking and rechecking his work. The sun moved across the sky outside, and the light in the shop changed from gold to orange to deep red. Sam did not notice. He was completely focused on the task in front of him. Finally, he set the crystal back into its proper position and secured it with more copper wire. The glow inside seemed a little stronger now, pulsing with a steadier rhythm. "Now comes the hard part," Sam said. "We have to put her back together and hope it works." Reached out and squeezed his hand. Her small purple fingers were warm against his rough, calloused palm. "It will work," she said. "I know it will." Sam wished he had her confidence, but he had done everything he could with the tools and knowledge available to him. Sometimes that was all you could do. Sometimes you just had to try your best and hope it was enough. He began the slow process of reassembling the robot, carefully connecting each piece, making sure nothing was loose or out of place. The sun set completely, and he turned on more lights. His back ached, his eyes burned, and his fingers were starting to cramp. But he did not stop. The clock on the wall showed almost 9 in the evening when Sam finally finished his work. He had been at it for nearly 5 hours without a break. His hands were sore, his vision was blurry, and his back felt like it might never straighten properly again. But the robot lay before him on the workbench, whole once more. The back panel was sealed, all the connections were secure, and there were no more rattling sounds when he lifted her gently. "I think she is ready," Sam said, "but I do not know how to turn her on." Had stayed awake the entire time, watching from her stool with patient determination. Now she slid down and walked to the workbench, her small footsteps barely making any sound on the concrete floor. "May I?" she asked. Sam nodded and carefully handed the robot to her. Cradled Myra in her arms like a mother holding a sleeping child. Then she pressed her small palm against the robot's forehead and closed her eyes. For a long moment, nothing happened. The shop was silent except for the soft hum of the overhead lights and the distant sound of crickets outside. Sam held his breath. Then slowly something changed. A soft glow began to spread through the robot's body, starting from the chest and moving outward like sunrise spreading across a dark land. The joints, which had been stiff and lifeless, began to relax. The fingers twitched slightly. And then the eyes opened. They were beautiful eyes, warm amber color, designed to look kind and friendly. They blinked twice, slowly, like someone waking from a deep and dreamless sleep. Then they focused on space. The robot said. Her voice was soft and musical, like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "I had the strangest dream. I was flying through a field of stars, and I could hear your father's voice. He was singing that song he used to sing to you at bedtime. The one about the little moon that got lost and found its way home." Made a sound that was half laugh and half sob. She hugged the robot tightly against her chest, burying her face in the smooth metal of Myra's shoulder. "You came back," cried. "You came back to me. I was so scared you were gone forever." "I could never leave you forever," Myra said gently, wrapping her arms around the little girl. "I promised your father I would always watch over you. That is a promise I intend to keep until the stars themselves grow cold." Sam felt his eyes getting wet. He turned away and pretended to organize his tools, giving the girl and her robot friend a moment of privacy. He thought about his wife again, about how she used to hug their daughter exactly that way. Some things were universal, it seemed. Love looked the same whether you were human or alien. After a few moments, Myra looked up from some brace and fixed her amber eyes on Sam. There was something in her gaze that was more than just programming. There was gratitude there and understanding. "You repaired me," she said. "I can feel the new structures supporting my memory core. The materials are not what I am used to, but they were applied with remarkable skill and care. You saved more than just machinery today, human. You saved 17 years of precious memories." Sam shrugged, feeling uncomfortable with the praise. "I just did what I could with what I had. It was not anything special." "You are wrong," Myra said firmly. "It was very special. My original designer was considered the greatest engineer in the Empire. He spent 3 years creating my memory core, using materials gathered from across the galaxy. Today, you repaired that core using copper wire and industrial adhesive from a rural Earth supply store." She paused, and something that looked like wonder passed across her artificial face. "According to my diagnostic systems, the repair you made is actually stronger than the original design. The copper wire brace distributes stress more evenly than my previous housing. The adhesive has bonded with the crystal at a molecular level, filling microscopic imperfections that existed since my creation. You did not just fix me, Sam Carter. You improved me." Sam did not know what to say to that. He had just done what seemed logical, what felt right. He had not been trying to improve anything. He had just been trying to help a little girl get her friend back. "I am glad you are okay," he finally said. "Was very worried about you." "I know." Myra stroked the little girl's hair gently. "She loves deeply just like her father did. It is both a blessing and a burden." Outside, hidden in the darkness, Empress had not moved from her position for the entire 5 hours. Her legs ached from standing so still, but she barely noticed. She had watched every moment of the repair through the window, and she had seen something that changed everything she thought she knew about humans. Her chief engineer stood beside her, his face showing complete confusion. "I do not understand," he said for perhaps the 20th time. "The mathematics do not work. That repair should have failed. The resonance frequency of the memory crystal should have torn apart those primitive materials within seconds of activation." "And yet it did not," said quietly. "But how? He has no formal training in our technology. He does not even understand the basic principles of quantum state memory storage. How could he possibly succeed where our own engineers might have failed?" Thought about that question for a long moment. She thought about her husband, who had loved humans from afar, who had spent years studying their broadcasts and history and art. He had tried to explain to her what made them special, but she had never truly understood. Now, watching through the window as the human mechanic cleaned up his workspace, while her daughter talked happily with her restored companion, thought she finally understood what her husband had been trying to say. "He succeeded because he did not know he was supposed to fail," she said. "He did not know the mathematics. He did not know the theories. He did not know all the reasons why his repair should have been impossible. He only knew that a little girl needed help, and he was not willing to give up until he had done everything he could." "That is not logical," the engineer protested. "No," agreed. "It is not logical. It is something else entirely. Something our species lost a long time ago, perhaps. Something we forgot in all our centuries of advancement and expansion." She watched as Sam offered a glass of water and a package of crackers from his lunch box. The little princess accepted them gratefully, and Myra helped her eat, making sure she did not make too much of a mess. "What is that something?" the engineer asked. Hope said, "Faith. The belief that if you try hard enough and care deeply enough, you can overcome anything, even the impossible." She straightened her shoulders and made a decision. "It is time," she said. "I have seen enough. I know what I must do." "My Empress, prepare to deactivate the cloaking field. I am going to meet this human properly." The guards shifted nervously. "Is that wise? The princess is safe now. We could simply take her and leave. The human would never know we were here." That is exactly why I must speak with him, said. Because he did not do this for reward or recognition. He did not know anyone was watching. He helped my daughter simply because she needed help. That kind of kindness deserves to be acknowledged. She touched a control on her wrist, and the air around her began to shimmer. Besides, she added, I promised my husband I would give humanity a fair evaluation, and I always keep my promises. Sam was wiping down his workbench when the air in his shop suddenly changed. It was like the atmosphere itself became heavier, charged with an energy that made the hair on his arms stand up. He turned around slowly, his hand still holding the cleaning rag. Where there had been empty space near the window, there now stood a woman who looked like she had stepped out of a dream, or perhaps a nightmare, depending on your point of view. She was tall, at least 6 feet, with the same lavender skin and purple eyes as. But where the child looked soft and innocent, this woman looked like she had conquered worlds and crushed rebellions. Her face was beautiful in a sharp, dangerous way, like a perfectly crafted blade. She wore armor that seemed to be made of living light, shifting and flowing with her movements. Behind her stood 4 guards in dark uniforms, their hands resting on weapons that hummed with barely contained power. They looked at Sam like he was an insect they were considering whether to step on. Sam's hand tightened on his rag. He glanced toward the corner where he kept an old baseball bat, then decided against it. Whatever these aliens could do, a bat was not going to help. Mom said happily, not seeming surprised at all. You were watching the whole time, were you not? I was, little star, the woman said, and her voice was like music played on instruments Sam had never heard. I had to make sure you were safe. I told you humans were good. I told you they would help. You did. The woman knelt gracefully and opened her arms, ran to her, and for a moment the terrifying alien empress looked like nothing more than a mother greeting her child. And you were right. She stood again, lifting with one arm as though the girl weighed nothing. Then she turned her full attention to Sam. I am, she said, Empress of the 7th Dominion. My territory spans 400 star systems and contains populations beyond your ability to count. I command fleets that could reduce this planet to dust in the time it takes you to blink. Sam forced himself to stand straight and meet her eyes. His heart was pounding so hard he could feel it in his teeth, but he was not going to show fear in front of this woman. He had faced down angry bulls and desperate men with guns. He could face this. Is that supposed to scare me? He asked. Something that might have been respect flickered in the Empress's eyes. It is supposed to provide context, so that you understand the weight of what I am about to say. She stepped closer and Sam noticed that the guards tensed slightly, ready to act if he did anything threatening. He stayed very still. For the past 6 years, continued, my advisors have debated what to do about humanity. You have been watched, studied, analyzed. Your history has been examined, your technology assessed, your potential calculated. I did not know we were being watched, Sam said. That was intentional. We wanted to see humans as they truly are, not as they would pretend to be if they knew they were being observed. She paused and something shifted in her expression. The hard edge softened just slightly. There are many in my council who believe humanity should be contained. They have seen your wars, your cruelty to each other, your destruction of your own planet. They believe you are a danger, not just to yourselves but to everyone else in the galaxy. They wanted to build a barrier around your solar system, to keep you trapped here until you either destroy yourselves or prove worthy of the stars. Sam felt cold hearing this. The fate of his entire species, decided by aliens he had never known existed. And what do you believe? He asked. Looked at the robot in her daughter's arms. Sam could see the copper wire he had wrapped around its heart, visible through a small window in its chest. Such a crude repair, done with such primitive tools. And yet it had worked. My husband believed in humans, said softly. He died 3 years ago, fighting to protect a world that was not even part of our empire, simply because innocent people lived there and needed help. Before he died, he made me promise to give your species a fair evaluation, to look beyond the violence and selfishness that my advisors saw and to search for something more. Did you find it? I did not know. That is why I allowed my daughter to conduct this test. She believed that if she came to a human in need, that human would help her without asking for anything in return. She believed humans were capable of pure, selfless kindness. Reached into a fold of her armor and pulled out a small device. It looked like a piece of jewelry, a crystal pendant on a silver chain, but Sam could feel it humming with energy. You spent 5 hours repairing a machine for a child you had never met, she said. You used tools that should have been completely useless. You succeeded at a task that my own engineers said was impossible, and when it was done, you asked for nothing. Not money, not thanks, not even an explanation. I did not need an explanation, Sam said. A little girl needed help. That is all I needed to know. Yes, smiled, and it transformed her face completely. For a moment, she did not look like an empress at all. She looked like a mother who had just watched her child's faith be rewarded. That is exactly what my daughter said you would say, and that is exactly why I am going to overrule my counsel. She pressed the device into Sam's hand. It was warm against his palm, and he could feel it pulsing with its own heartbeat. This is a beacon, explained. It is keyed to your genetic signature and cannot be used by anyone else. When your species is ready, when humanity finally reaches beyond your own star, activate it. The seventh dominion will be waiting, not as conquerors or judges, but as friends and allies. Sam looked at the device in his hand, then back at the alien empress. Why give this to me? I am just a mechanic in a small town. I am nobody important. You are wrong, said firmly. You are very important, not because of your position or your power, but because of who you are. You represent what humanity can be at its best, and that is something far more valuable than any title or authority. She turned to leave, then paused and looked back at him. My husband was right about your species, Sam Carter. You are different from everyone else we have encountered in our journey across the stars. Not because of your technology, which is far behind ours. Not because of your military, which could not challenge even a small portion of our forces, but because of your heart. What about our heart? It is big enough to care for strangers, strong enough to try when success seems impossible, and stubborn enough to never give up, even when all logic says you should. She smiled again. The galaxy needs more of that, much more. Waved at Sam from her mother's arms. Thank you for fixing Myra, Sam Carter. I will remember you forever. You are welcome, little star, Sam said, using the name her mother had called her. Take care of yourself, and take care of Myra. I will, I promise. The Empress nodded once at Sam, a gesture of respect from one ruler to another. Then the air shimmered around her, and she and her guards began to fade from sight. Wait, Sam called out. Your husband, what was his name? The Empress's voice came from empty air, already sounding distant. His name was, and he would have liked you very much, Sam Carter. He would have liked you very much indeed. Then she was gone, and Sam was alone in his shop with nothing but a warm beacon in his hand, and the feeling that the world had just changed in ways he could not yet understand. Sam walked outside just in time to see the lights rising into the sky. The alien ship had been parked in his back field, invisible the entire time, crushing the garden that his wife had planted years ago. Now it lifted silently into the darkness, becoming just another star among millions, and then winking out of existence entirely as it jumped to wherever empresses and their daughters went when they left small Kansas towns behind. He stood there for a long time, holding the beacon in his hand and staring up at the sky. The crickets sang their evening songs around him. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Everything was normal, exactly as it had always been. and yet nothing would ever be the same again. Sam went back inside and locked up his shop. He put the beacon in his pocket, where its warmth pressed against his leg like a small, patient heartbeat. He drove home through the quiet streets of, past the church and the grocery store and the old gas station that had closed down years ago. He did not tell anyone what had happened. Who would believe him? The town already thought he was a bit strange, the widower who spent all his time talking to machines instead of people. Adding crazy alien stories to his reputation would not help anything. But sometimes, late at night when he could not sleep, Sam would take the beacon out and hold it in his hands. He would feel its warmth and think about her broken robot. He would think about an empress who had watched through invisible walls, judging all of humanity based on what he did in a small repair shop on a random Tuesday evening. He hoped he had done enough. He hoped his simple kindness, his stubborn refusal to give up, had been enough to earn his species a place among the stars. 3 years later, Sam Carter died peacefully in his sleep. He was 72 years old, and according to his doctor, his heart had simply decided it was time to rest. He went quietly, without pain, in the same bed he had shared with his wife for 30 years. His daughter flew in from across the country to handle his affairs. Her name was Lucy, and she had her father's eyes and her mother's smile. She spent 2 weeks going through the house, sorting through decades of accumulated memories, deciding what to keep and what to give away. She found the beacon in a small wooden box on his nightstand, along with a photograph of her mother and a collection of letters they had written to each other during their courtship. At first, she thought it was just another of his strange engineering projects. He had always been tinkering with things, building gadgets that did not quite work the way they were supposed to. But something about the beacon made her pause. It was warm to the touch, even though it had been sitting in the box for who knew how long. And when she held it, she could have sworn she felt something, like a heartbeat or a distant signal. She put it back in the box and took it home with her. She could not say why, it just felt important. 40 years passed. Lucy grew old and had children of her own. She told them about their grandfather sometimes, about the kind mechanic who could fix anything and who always had time to help his neighbors. She did not tell them about the beacon because she did not understand it herself. When Lucy died, her daughter found the box among her things. Her name was Kate, and she was an engineer, just like her great-grandfather had been in his own way. When she held the beacon and felt its warmth, she knew immediately that this was something special, something beyond ordinary technology. She spent years studying it carefully, without damaging it. She wrote papers about the materials it contained, materials that should not exist according to everything humanity knew about physics. She became famous in certain scientific circles, the woman who had found proof of alien contact. And then finally, humanity built its first true starship. It was not much by galactic standards. A small vessel with a crew of 12, powered by engines that were revolutionary for Earth, but probably laughable to civilizations that had been traveling between stars for millions of years. Its mission was simple: to go beyond the edge of the solar system and see what was there. Kate, now 70 years old but still sharp as ever, insisted that the beacon go with them. She had spent her whole life trying to understand it, and she knew that it was meant to be activated somewhere out there, among the stars. The ship was called the Pioneer. It launched on a bright morning in spring, watched by millions of people around the world. Kate was not among the crew, too old for such a journey, but her granddaughter was. Her name was Emma, and she carried the beacon in her pocket, just as Sam had carried it so many years before. When the Pioneer crossed beyond the orbit of Pluto, when Earth was nothing but a tiny blue dot lost in the darkness, Emma took out the beacon and pressed its center, just as Kate had instructed her to do. The response was immediate. Space itself seemed to fold and ripple around them. Warning alarms screamed throughout the ship as the crew scrambled to their stations. The captain shouted orders that no one could hear over the chaos. And then, as suddenly as it had started, everything went quiet. The Pioneer floated in the middle of a formation of ships. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, each one larger and more elegant than anything humanity had ever built. They hung in space like a flock of silver birds, their surfaces gleaming with lights that pulsed in gentle, welcoming patterns. The communication system crackled to life. "Humans of Earth," said a voice that carried across the void. "The Seventh Dominion welcomes you to the galactic community. We have waited a long time to meet you properly." On the main, a face appeared. She was a woman with lavender skin and amethyst eyes, beautiful in the way that ancient things are beautiful. She wore a crown of silver light, and her smile carried the weight of centuries. Behind her, barely visible at the edge of the frame, stood an android with copper wire wrapped around her heart. "My name is," the Empress said. "My mother was the previous Empress, and she made me promise to be here when this moment came. She believed in humanity. My father believed in humanity. And 60 years ago, a kind mechanic in a small Earth town showed me that they were right to believe." Emma stared at the screen, her hand still clutching the beacon. She thought about the stories her grandmother had told her, about the mysterious device and the great-grandfather who had left it behind. "He saved my best friend when no one else could," continued. "He used tools that should have been useless and succeeded at a task that should have been impossible. And when I asked him why, he said something I have never forgotten." "What did he say?" Emma asked, finding her voice. Smiled, and for a moment she looked like a little girl again, sitting on a worn leather stool in a dusty repair shop. "He said that someone needed help, and that was all he needed to know." The Empress straightened in her throne and spread her arms wide, a gesture of welcome that encompassed the entire human ship. "The universe has many broken things that need mending, many wounded hearts that need healing, many problems that seem impossible but might yield to stubborn kindness and patient care. My mother promised that when humanity was ready, we would be waiting, not as your masters or your judges, but as your partners and your friends." She leaned forward, and her eyes seemed to look directly at Emma, directly at the beacon she still held. "Are you ready, children of Earth? Are you ready to help us fix what is broken?" Emma looked at her crew. She looked at the vast fleet surrounding them, ships from civilizations that had been old when her species was still learning to make fire. She looked at the beacon in her hand, warm as a heartbeat, connecting her to a kind old man who had died before she was born. "That is what we do," she said, and her voice carried across the gulf between stars. "Someone needs help and we help them. That is what we have always done. That is what we will always do." Empress nodded, and her smile grew wider. "Then welcome to the galaxy, humanity. Welcome home." And so it began. Not with conquest or war, but with an open hand and a simple truth, that the universe was vast and full of broken things, and that there was always room for those who were willing to help fix them. Somewhere, somehow, Sam Carter was smiling. His little repair had changed everything.